Welcome to another video tutorial. In this video, we're going to take a look at loading and saving data, basically using data files as a means of keeping data that can be used in conjunction with your game. So this could be used for saving and then restoring global properties or other in-game variables. So it's pretty much like an extension of global properties, except that they can be stored in files outside of your game. So it's just a little bit more robust, a sort of more robust way of using, of storing your in-game data. So first of all, how do you save data? So let's go into the script editor, and I'll quickly show you how you store data, where it gets stored, and then how you then use that data, and then at the very end we'll talk about how to delete that data. So let's start by creating a new script, which we'll just call data demo. Oops. And I will go into the script editor, full screen. So let's say you've got a global property called, I don't know, money, let's say. And that starts out at 100. So you've got 100 gold coins or something like that. Now, what you might want to do as well is store that value so that you've always got access to it, irrespective of whether this global property exists or whether it gets reset at some point or gets set differently. So you want to have a sort of copy of this number here outside of the game. So that's where save data or load data comes in. So what you do is you type save_data. That's the function that does the saving of data. And then it takes two parameters. The first parameter is what's the data that's going to be saved. And then the second parameter is what's the file name for this particular data file. Now, it needs to be pointed out at this point in time that data files can only store one value, a single value. So for example, if I was to type, let me just finish typing this out. So what we want to write into this data file is the contents of this global property. So we're going to save data, global property money, into this data file. And then the second parameter is what do we call this data file? Let's call this money. Makes sense? That's what the property is called. So we'll call the file money. It doesn't have to be called the same thing, but it just makes sense. So we're going to call this data file money. Okay. Now, if I was to then type save data 120 into money, that's going to overwrite the line above. Okay, so data files can only store a single value at a time. Okay, so if you write into the same file a different request or different save data request, it will overwrite this one with this one. Okay, if you wanted to store 120 as a separate value, then you'll have to call this money2 or something like that. So it'd have to be called something fundamentally different. Okay. However, that being said, there is a way to write multiple values into a file, and we will get to that. But just understand for the moment that it has to be a single value. Okay. So this should work now in the sense if we apply and save that, when we run this script, it's going to set this property, money, to 100. Then it's also going to make a data file that's got the contents of that in a file called money. Now, before we run the game, let me show you where this file is located. Now, I'm currently on a Steam Deck, so the file path is going to be very different to how it is on Windows. If I remember to do this, I will film some footage on my Windows machine showing where it would be. But on Windows, it's basically going to be your C drive, users, then your username, app data, roaming, and then the name of your project file. So on the Steam Deck, it's in the Steam Apps folder, compat data, the ID for the game, PFX, and then you'll have a Drive C folder, users, Steam user, application data, and then this is the folder of my project that I'm working in at the moment. So this is what's inside that quick game folder. It's just a single settings.cfg file. Okay. Now let's run this game. And let's choose introduction. Let's bring down the console and let's type execute data demo. Okay. Now if we print global property money, we can see it's 100. So not only did we set global property money to 100, but we should also have saved it to a data file. So if we now quit the game and look back at that folder, we can see there's a money file that wasn't there before, but the save data command has saved and created this file in our quick game folder. So if we open this with a text editor, it's encrypted, but that would be 100. Okay. Now we can verify that because if we go back to the code, and now let's make this a load request. So instead of, we'll do this the other way around. We'll cut that line away. We'll put it underneath. And what we'll do is we'll say load data. And then load data only requires one parameter, which is the name of the file. So what it does is it brings in all of that data. However, what you do need to do is you need to store it somewhere. So for now, let's just put it in a local variable called data. That will be allowed, perhaps not. Let's just call it dat. Okay. So $dat equals load data money. So it's going to bring in that value, because remember, data files can only hold a sort of single value. So we're going to bring in the value that's in this file. It's going to get placed into here. And then what we can do is we can say global property money equals $dat. So that should then set the global property to what the contents of this file are. So if we quick play, and we bring the console down and we just print for a moment just to show that it's not set. It's null. There's no data in property. In fact, global property money doesn't even exist at the moment. But now if I type exec data demo, it should load in the value that's in that file and set the global property to that value. So that's run. So let's print global property money again. And it's 100, which is what we set it to when we saved it. But we didn't set it this time, but it's loaded it back in and set it to 100. Okay. So let's just quit the game again. Now it is possible to store multiple pieces of data into a file. So let's quickly go over how to do that. So to do that, you would use either arrays or codexes. Now codexes are very similar to arrays. In fact, they function pretty much the same. The only difference between a codex and array is that the codex actually has a lookup key and value system. So I'll show you how that works. So let's do codex because it sort of makes sort of the most sense for data files. So let's make a local variable called myCodex. Then it can equal codex. And then just like an array, it goes in within square brackets, and the values are broken up by commas like that. Okay, that would be your standard array type thing. But in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to have a key and then a value. So let's say we have money as the first key, and then we have a colon, and then the value. So money should be 100. Then, I don't know what, let's store health maybe, player's health. And that can be 20. And then let's do one more. Maybe let's do like a property check. So, boss dead. And then colon false. So those are our sort of things we want to hold on to value-wise. We want a money value, that a money key that has our starting money, health key which has our starting health, and we'll keep track of whether a boss has been killed or not with a Boolean variable. Okay, and we want to write this now to a file. So we do save data, and we write $myCodex into a file. Let's call it game info, something like that. And let's apply and save that. So now when we run the game, and we bring the console down and we type execute data demo, it should now have created behind the scenes a game info file. And again, if we open this with text editor, we're probably not going to make too much sense out of it, but we can see the keys at least. So money, health, boss dead. So the keys are in there at least. We just can't see the numerical or Boolean values because they're not text. If you had any string data, which is what money and health and boss dead is, because they're keys, but if we actually had any string data as well, you'd be able to read the strings as well. But that just at least shows you that the keys are in there. So then how do you read back and put into place data that's inside a game data file? So let's say we now want to do the reverse. We want to bring this data back into our game, so load it in, and then set everything up as it should be set. So to do that, we'll go full screen on this, we'll edit the code again, and we will put the data into a DAT file again. DAT equals load data, and file is called game info. So we'll bring in all of the information first, and then we want to set the property. We want to set the, let's say, player.stat currency. So we want to set the money of the player to 100. So player stat currency equals, and then $dat, and then open and close square brackets, just like an array where you would put 0 for the first thing in the array, or 1 for the second thing in the array, etc. In this case, dat is a codex because that's what the data is that's inside this file. So instead you use the key value. So in this case, money. So that will put the value that we put in after the semicolon next to money into this stat. So it's going to put 100 because that's the value that came after the colon in money. That's going to put 100 into this stat here. Okay. Then we want player dot stat HP to equal $dat health. So that should put the health value into stat. And then the last thing is a global property. Let's call it boss check. And that equals $dat. And the key, I believe, is boss dead. So that should be false. That will create this property and set it to false. So let's apply and save that. So let's give this a check. So before we do anything, let's just print things just to see what they're currently set to. So let's print player stat currency. Currently I don't have any money, so that's good. So that should change. What about HP? That's already 20, so you're not going to see it. Well, I'll tell you what, we'll change it. Let's get rid of the print. Player stat HP take away 10. Right, equals 10 then. Let's print it again. Okay, so that's 10. And then you don't need to print the global property because it doesn't even exist. It's going to be null. But now let's execute data demo. So that should bring in all of those values from that codex. And now if we print currency, it should be 100. And it is. If we print health, it should be 20. So it's back up to 20. And if we print global dot property boss check, it should be false. So it exists and it's set to the value that's in the codex. Okay, so that's how to save multiple pieces of data into one file. You use a codex or an array. You can use an array as well, but codex obviously allows you to give your data individual names, so it makes sense what you're writing in at that point, as opposed to arrays where you'd have to know the index number. The other thing to show you is how to check if data even exists. So, for example, at the moment, this is just going to bring the data in irrespective of whether it exists or not and try and set these three things to those values. However, what if that file doesn't exist? Let's delete that for a moment and let's run the game again and see what happens now. Let's run data demo. Yeah, you get a load of errors because it can't find the file and it's trying to bring in the data, and the code is trying to then assign, in this case, non-existent data to a variety of things that can't be set. So it's failing and it's giving loads of errors. So to deal with that, what you want to do, the best way when it comes to handling data, is to test and check before you assign any that it exists. So once you've brought in data, so leave this line as it is, but then what you do is you say if $dat not equal to null, then do all of this. And then if you wanted, you could have a message that pops up, but to be honest, you don't need to in this case. So this is just basically going to error trap. So in other words, it's not going to error. So let's apply and save that and give this a test. So now this time when we run the command, it shouldn't error. It's not going to set anything because there's nothing to set. The file still doesn't exist, but it should stop those errors from popping up. There is one that pops up, which is that it can't find that file, but it's not an error, it's just a warning. Okay, but we've got rid of those errors because we're not writing to those properties and stats anymore because it's come back as null. So, I'm not sure if there's a way to catch that as well, whether you could say if $dat equals load game info not equal to null. I'm not sure whether that kind of thing is doable. Let's just try that. No. There might be a way to do something like that, but at least for now, that stops the error from popping up. So, the last thing to go over is how to delete data, because it's possible to do that as well. So, let's say we've let's quickly create one for a second. Let's comment this out so we come back to it. In fact, we go no. Let's comment this out because I'm going to use this again. And let's just quickly, let's do an array. It's quicker. So let's have a string, a number. In fact, let's have a different number. And a Boolean. And another string. So there's our array. And we want to save data $myArray into array stuff. So that's going to create a file with the contents of this array inside. So let's quit and check that exists. Array stuff, there it is. Let's open it up with a text editor. There you go, you can see hello world, and you can see some of the other things in the array, but obviously most of it is encrypted. So to write it back, we can then use this code here. So we'll load array stuff. And then we'll check if it's not null, then do all of this. But we'll make a change to this stuff. So instead of setting the currency, we'll create a global property called text1, which can equal dat 0. So that's the first entry in the array. And then let's copy that. Global property number1 equals dat array index 1. And then we want global property is true, should equal dat entry 2, and then the last one, global property text 2, equals $dat free. So that should write all the different elements of the array into these 4 global properties. And then at the very end, when that's complete, what we can then do is we can say delete data, and it just takes again a single parameter, the name of the data file. So if you wanted to, you could write the data, you could load the data in, set things up as they need to be, and then delete the data afterwards. Delete the data file afterwards. These would still be set, but the file would then be gone. So just to show the file exists, we now run the game. Bring down the console, execute data demo. Just all tab out for a second. File is gone, array stuff is no longer there. And then let's just quickly go back to the game and just check that it has done all those properties. So the first one was text1, this should say hello, which it does. Text2 should say world, which it does. Number 1 should be 200, which it is. And then the last property was is true, which should be true. And it is. So it's set all those properties up based on the array that was in that data file. So anyway, so there's just a couple of examples of where you might find the most use in using data files. And this video, as I say, has covered how to use the data files both in writing the data, loading the data, and also deleting the data if you don't need it anymore. So with that said, I hope this video was helpful. If you have any questions, as always, feel free to ask on the Discord. But for now, that'll wrap up this video. Thanks for watching.